Obama will address the nation on Friday when he's expected to announce reforms to the NSA and its controversial surveillance programs. In a new interview today, Senator John McCain said this should only be the beginning.
Let's face it, when one guy who works for a contractor is able to reveal all this information and supposedly there's much more that he hasn't, then there's something wrong with the system right there. Is there anybody that believes that this system is not broken in many respects? I think not.
Joining me now, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, member of the Intelligence Committee. Welcome. Nice to see you, sir.
You too. Thanks, Alex.
So possible changes here. Let's take a look at them, because the ones that have been reported so far would include extending privacy protections to non-U.S. citizens, creating a new job for the advocacy issues and privacy issues there, and perhaps most importantly, reforming telephone surveillance so that data is stored by the phone companies, not the NSA. You are the one sponsoring for the bill, calling for that last one. Do you think that's going to be included in the president's reforms?
I certainly hope so. Several of us had a meeting with the president last week, and he kept his cards pretty close to the vest. But he's doing exactly the analysis that the American people should want the president to do, and that is going through each of those review panel recommendations, all 46 of them, and saying, okay, what is technologically feasible? What impact does it have in terms of protecting privacy? What costs are there, if any, in terms of our national security? So he's doing exactly the right analysis. Where he'll ultimately come down on that telephone metadata program, I certainly hope it will be a restructure where the government will cease to gather these millions and millions of records and instead let the communications providers hold on to their own data.
But the question there, why would the phone companies storing this data make a difference? Would they not just be something like a holding tank for the NSA, or would it be difficult to get that information on a case-by-case basis?
Well, it wouldn't be difficult to get the data. I think the government could still get the data in a timely way to protect the country. But these are records that the telephone companies keep themselves for their own business purposes, obviously in order to bill us for our calls and to make sure they have records if there's a dispute down the road. They already keep them for a certain period of time. The FCC, for example, requires them to do that. I think that the American people would feel more comfortable with private companies keeping their own data, banks keeping their own data, telephone companies keeping their own data, than the government vacuuming up all that information in those few cases, for those few cases where it actually needs to use it. So I think it is more respectful of the privacy interests of the public.
Now, one of these proposed reforms, sir, is a privacy advocate who would then argue in the FISA court. You know, this would seem like a lot of common sense to people, but as it stands now, there is no one arguing against the government in FISA hearings. So what kind of system do we have in place at the moment? Is it adequate?
I think it certainly can be improved, and a number of the FISA court judges that have left the court have now spoken out publicly and advocated for just this kind of an independent advocate. One thing I was heartened at this meeting at the White House, there seemed to be fairly broad agreement on this point, that there should be some form of adversarial process. What now is at stake is, what is the model going to be? Is that advocate going to be part of the court itself? Is it going to be somebody appointed independently, which I recommend because I think it would give the public more confidence that it truly is an adversarial process. But I think it will improve the quality of the opinions coming out of the court, and I think we're heading that direction.
Okay, I would like to ask you about some breaking news that we've been getting here about the White House and Tehran having announced that the Iran nuclear deal will go into effect on January 20th in terms of Iran beginning to eliminate its highly enriched uranium. It's going to allow in the UN inspectors. Also, the U.S. will ease up on some sanctions, not remove them, but just ease up on them. What's your reaction to that?
I think it's positive news. We had this interim agreement reached, but in terms of trying to get those final details on implementation, there were a number of problems that have now been overcome, and so that agreement will go into effect. It'll mean the blending down of the 20% enriched uranium. It'll put a cap on how much 3 or 5% enriched uranium we have during this interim period. It will halt work on the reactor at Arak. All of these things very significant. Whether it will lead ultimately to that final agreement or it will end up collapsing, no one can say. But I think this is the best opportunity diplomatically to resolve and put an end to this nuclear weapons program, or a program with that potential in Iran. So I think we have to pursue it.
And you say that it's going to cap at 3 to 5% the amount of enriched uranium they're able to have. And we had seen a report that they will actually begin destroying some of its stockpile, which would indicate they have more than that. So you believe they will destroy to come down to that amount?
Well, they have to blend down the 20% enriched uranium. In terms of the 3 to 5% enriched uranium, they can continue to process that as long as any additional increment is removed on the back end. The net result being 6 months from now, they're not allowed to have any more 3 to 5% enriched uranium than they have today. But the kind of uranium that's of most concern to us is the 20%. That's the more highly enriched uranium, and that will be gone during this period. So I think that's an important step, as well as these very rigorous and much more timely inspections of the Iranian facilities. It's not, a perfect deal by any means, but I think it is a positive step that will test the Iranians and find out whether they're serious about walking away from this problem.
It's a start. All right, Representative Adam Schiff, many thanks as always.
You bet.